My mother-in-law, Gloria, called it a little family brainstorm. That was the phrase she used the morning she sat across from me at my own kitchen table, flipping through the business plan I had spent 14 months building from scratch. She turned each page slowly, like she was reading a restaurant menu. Her husband, Raymond, stood by the window pretending to study the garden. My husband, Marcus, sat beside me saying nothing at all. I watched Gloria's finger trace my projected revenue numbers, figures I had calculated past midnight for weeks, and I felt something cold move through my chest. Not fear exactly. More like the first warning before a storm, the kind you feel in your bones before the sky changes. I had built Bloom and Basket, my handmade gift curation business, from a folding table in our spare bedroom. Every supplier contact, every packaging design, every pricing strategy was mine alone. I had poured 3 years of savings, sleepless nights, and quiet personal sacrifices into that plan. And now Gloria was nodding slowly, tapping the page with one manicured finger, saying, "You know, Raymond and I have been thinking about something very similar to this." I smiled politely. I said nothing. But something deep inside me went very, very still. I need to take you back to where this really started, because the betrayal did not happen overnight. It never does with family. Marcus and I had been married 4 years when I first told him about my business idea. We were sitting on the back porch on a warm Thursday evening, sharing a bowl of groundnut soup his mother had sent over. I told him I wanted to build a premium gifting brand, curated boxes filled with handmade items from small local artisans. Birthday boxes, wedding boxes, new baby boxes. Things people could not find in a regular shop. Things that felt genuinely personal. Marcus smiled and said it sounded lovely. He did not ask many questions. That was Marcus, supportive in a comfortable, distant way, like a wall that did not push back but also did not hold much up. I spent the next year researching quietly alone. I interviewed over 30 local artisans. I built supplier relationships carefully. I designed a logo. I created a full financial model in a notebook kept in my bedside drawer. I shared only small pieces with Marcus and nothing with anyone else. I had learned early in our marriage that ideas shared too openly had a way of being picked up before they were ready to fly. Gloria had a way of making herself the center of every room she entered. She was not obviously cruel. She was the kind of woman who smiled warmly while rearranging your furniture and then complimented you on how much better the room looked afterward. She had opinions about how I cooked, how I dressed, how I spent money, and how I spoke to her son. Raymond was quieter but no less calculating. He had run a small printing business for years and considered himself an authority on all commercial matters without exception. The first time I mentioned Bloom and Basket to them, a careless slip during Sunday lunch, barely 2 sentences, Raymond leaned forward immediately and asked 3 very specific questions about my supplier margins. I changed the subject quickly. But I noticed he did not let it go completely. He and Gloria exchanged a brief look across the table, the kind of loaded, wordless look that long-married couples develop without noticing. Quick. Communicating everything. I told myself I was imagining things. I told myself these were my husband's parents and they genuinely meant well. I poured more juice and laughed at something Marcus said and pushed that uneasy feeling firmly downward. But it stayed there anyway, quiet and patient, waiting for its moment. 6 months before the kitchen table morning, I made what I now understand was my biggest mistake. Marcus asked me to present my full business plan at a family dinner. His parents were visiting for a week and he thought their input would be helpful and inclusive. I did not want to. I said I was not ready. He said his father had real business experience and could offer valuable feedback. He said his mother had great instincts for people. I agreed because I loved my husband and wanted to believe that family meant safety. I printed a 12-page document. I brought supplier samples. I prepared a short presentation on my laptop. Raymond asked pointed questions about startup costs and exclusivity arrangements. Gloria cooed over my packaging samples and said she had always believed in the power of beautiful things. At the end, Raymond said my plan was very impressive for a first attempt. Gloria patted my hand and said I had real potential. Marcus beamed across the table with evident pride. I drove home that night feeling oddly hollow, like something had been quietly lifted from me without my noticing the exact moment it happened. I told myself I was being oversensitive. I sat with that feeling in the dark on the drive home and knew I was not. 3 weeks after that dinner, Marcus told me his parents wanted to invest. I remember the exact moment. I was washing dishes after dinner, my back turned to him, and he mentioned it casually, like noting the weather outside. I turned off the tap. I turned around. I asked what he meant by invest. He said his parents had savings set aside and genuinely believed in the idea. He said they wanted to come on board as partners. I asked him whether he had been discussing my business with them further, without telling me. He looked at the floor. He said they had just had a few conversations. A few conversations. I stood at the kitchen sink with soap still on my hands and felt the cold thing in my chest again, larger this time. I told Marcus I needed time to think about it. I did not sleep that night. I lay in the dark listing everything I had carefully built and everything that could be taken, and by 3 in the morning I had made a firm decision. I would not give Gloria and Raymond a partnership in Bloom and Basket. But I would not fight them loudly. Gloria never lost a loud fight. She could, however, be outmaneuvered completely by a quieter and more patient opponent. The kitchen table morning happened on a Tuesday. Marcus had already left for work. Gloria arrived before I came downstairs. She had a key, which was a whole separate problem, and was making tea when I walked in. My business plan was open on the table in front of her. I had left it there the previous evening. She looked up and gave me that warm, furniture rearranging smile. She said she and Raymond had been thinking about something very similar to Bloom and Basket. She said they had spoken with a few artisans in their neighborhood. She said a family business could be so beautiful. I sat down across from her. I picked up my business plan and closed it gently. I said the idea was very sweet of them. I told her I had been rethinking Bloom and Basket entirely and was no longer confident it was viable. I watched her face carefully. Something shifted behind her eyes, not disappointment, more like rapid recalculation, like a chess player whose opponent had moved unexpectedly. She said that was a shame. I smiled and said I appreciated her concern. Underneath the table, completely invisible to her, I was already several deliberate moves ahead of where she believed we were. I had been planning for 4 weeks by then. After the night Marcus mentioned the investment conversation, I did not panic. I sat with the information carefully and without rushing. I thought clearly about what Gloria and Raymond actually wanted, the suppliers, the branding, the financial model, everything I had built. They had seen the numbers and believed the business would succeed. They assumed I would either hand it over voluntarily or be gradually edged out over time. What they did not know was that I had already quietly separated Bloom and Basket into 2 distinct layers. The surface layer was everything they had seen, the printed plan, the samples, the revenue projections. The deep layer was everything they had not, my actual supplier contracts, signed under my name alone with exclusivity clauses attached. My trademark application, filed 2 months earlier. My customer waitlist of over 200 people registered through a small website I had built quietly. None of that appeared in any document they had ever read. None of it had been mentioned in any conversation I had with this family. I had been careful because some watchful part of me had always known this moment might eventually come. I simply had not wanted to fully believe that it would. I called my oldest friend, Adiz, the morning after the kitchen table incident. Adiz had known me since our university days. She was the kind of person who listened completely before she ever spoke, which was rare and genuinely valuable. I told her everything, the dinner presentation, the investment conversation Marcus had without telling me, Gloria's early morning visit, my business plan lying open on my own kitchen table. When I finished, Adiz was quiet for a moment. Then she said plainly, "Emma, you already know what this is." I did know. I had known since Raymond asked those margin questions at Sunday lunch months earlier. Adiz asked what I planned to do. I told her I had an idea forming. She asked whether it was the kind of idea that would make me look like the difficult one for about 6 months before people properly understood it. I laughed genuinely. I said probably yes. She said those were usually the correct ones. I told her the plan required real patience, a very calm face, and the ability to let people believe they had won when they had won nothing at all. Adiz said that sounded exactly like something I was fully capable of executing. She was right, and we both knew it completely. I want to be honest about Marcus because his role is not simple. He was not a villain the way his parents were. He was something harder, a good man with weak edges. He loved me, I believed that sincerely. But he had grown up in a household where Gloria's version of events was always the correct one, and where keeping the peace mattered more than speaking hard truths. When I told him I was rethinking Bloom and Basket, he looked genuinely sad. He said it was a wonderful idea and he had always believed in it. I asked why he had discussed it with his parents without telling me. He said he was excited and thought they could help. He had not seen the problem. I told him gently that sharing someone's private business plan without permission was a real problem. He apologized and meant it. But apology without changed behavior is simply a word, and Marcus had not yet changed. He still told his mother small things. He still let her keep her key. At his core he remained more her son than my partner. I loved who he was trying to become. I was still going to protect myself from what he had not left behind. The plan came together over 2 quiet weeks. I decided to give Gloria and Raymond exactly what they believed they wanted. I would tell them I had reconsidered everything carefully. I would say the investment idea was sensible after all and that I was grateful for their enthusiasm. I would present a complete, detailed, professional version of the business and step aside gracefully with a warm smile. What I handed them would be a fully functional gift curation concept with one defining difference: every exclusive supplier relationship I had built was mine alone. Each artisan had signed individual agreements with me personally, not with any company entity. Any competing business would need to build those relationships entirely from scratch over years of patient work. The trademark was mine. The customer waitlist was mine. The brand identity was entirely mine. What Gloria and Raymond would receive was an accurate, beautifully prepared instruction manual for a house they could not enter without my keys. They would realize this only after fully committing themselves, paying for the furniture, and moving everything confidently inside. By that point, I would already be building something better elsewhere, with everything I had quietly and carefully protected throughout. I told Marcus first. I sat him down on a Sunday evening and said I had been thinking and believed that partnering with his parents might actually be a reasonable path forward. I said I was stretched thin and genuinely needed support, and they clearly had enthusiasm for the concept. Marcus looked so visibly relieved that it was almost painful to watch. He hugged me. He said his parents would be absolutely thrilled. He said it was going to be wonderful for everyone involved. I nodded and smiled warmly. I felt a quiet sadness somewhere beneath all of it, not for myself, but for the version of our marriage where none of this strategic planning would have been necessary in the first place. I put that feeling carefully aside for later. I told Marcus I wanted to prepare a proper professional handover document before anything was made official. He said his parents would appreciate that enormously. He told me to take all the time I needed. I took exactly 12 days. I prepared the most thorough, well-organized, completely accurate business handover document I had ever produced. Every figure was correct. Every strategy was real. Nothing was invented. And not one word of it would give them what they actually needed to build anything that would last. Let me tell you about Blessing. She was my youngest supplier, 24 years old, making extraordinary hand-beaded jewelry from a small workshop in her mother's compound. I had found her at a craft fair 18 months before all of this began. We had built a genuine friendship over consistent visits and honest conversations. When I explained my situation privately, she did not hesitate for a single moment. She said, "Emma, I signed with you. My agreement is with you, not your in-laws, not anyone else in your husband's family. Every one of my 12 artisan suppliers responded essentially the same way. Funmi, who made the hand-poured candles. Tund, who crafted leather journal covers by hand. Amara, who baked and packaged artisan cookies with beautiful handwritten labels attached. These were people I had found, genuinely believed in, and consistently supported before they had significant sales or any wider recognition. Their loyalty existed because real loyalty had been extended to them first, without conditions. When Gloria and Raymond eventually launched their version of the business, they named it Treasure and Bloom, a detail that still required careful breathing when I thought about it. They would discover that every artisan I worked with was simply unavailable, bound by agreements that predated their ambitions entirely and completely. The handover meeting took place on a Saturday afternoon at Gloria and Raymond's home. I dressed carefully and arrived on time with a clear head. I brought printed folders with color-coded sections and a small box of sample products arranged neatly inside. I presented everything with genuine warmth and full professionalism throughout. Gloria cried real tears and declared this was what family was always supposed to look like. Raymond shook my hand firmly and said I was a remarkable young woman. Marcus squeezed my shoulder with quiet pride. I accepted all of it graciously and without hesitation. I answered every question completely. I explained my customer demographic research in detail. I walked them through the full pricing model. I showed them the social media content strategy one had developed over many months. Everything I shared was accurate. Everything I presented was entirely real. And not one page, not one single paragraph in those color-coded folders, contained the name of an exclusive supplier, the login to my customer waitlist platform, the trademark registration details, or the private contact list I had spent 3 years carefully building. All of that remained quietly in a folder on my personal laptop at home. Driving away that Saturday afternoon, I felt something I had not experienced in months. I felt completely, thoroughly, and honestly clean. I want to be honest about guilt because I felt it. Not crushing guilt, but real guilt, the kind that sits in your stomach at 2 in the morning and asks uncomfortable questions about who you actually are. I asked myself whether I had deceived my husband. I asked whether withholding information was the same as lying to someone who trusted you. I turned those questions over seriously without rushing toward comfortable answers. What I came back to was this: I had not fabricated anything. I had not forged documents or broken agreements or made false promises to anyone. I had simply protected what was rightfully mine by not handing it over under quiet family pressure. Gloria and Raymond had made a deliberate plan to acquire my business by using my husband's closeness to extract the information they wanted. I was not required to be their victim simply because I had seen the pattern forming. By the time I drove away from that Saturday meeting, I had already registered a new business name, a stronger one. I had emailed my artisan partners confirming our ongoing plans together. I had soft-launched to my waitlist with a carefully written announcement. Bloom and Basket had not died at all. It had quietly moved somewhere they could not follow me. Treasure and Bloom launched publicly 8 weeks later. I knew because Gloria telephoned personally to tell me, which was an interesting choice. Her voice carried clear triumph. She said they had found suppliers and the early response was overwhelming. She hoped I would be supportive of their venture going forward. I told her I was genuinely happy for them. In those same 8 weeks, I had completed my first 37 customer orders under my new brand, Petal Thread. A small lifestyle blog had featured me after one of my customers mentioned my work to the writer personally. 2 new artisans had reached out directly, having heard about my approach through the broader craft fair community. I had also, without any drama, consulted a lawyer about my trademark and supplier agreements, not to pursue anyone aggressively, but to understand precisely where I stood legally. The answer was that I stood on very solid and well-prepared ground. The lawyer confirmed my exclusivity agreements were fully enforceable. She said I had protected my interests carefully and well. I told her I had been given good reason to prepare, and she nodded without needing any further explanation from me about what that reason had been. The first sign that Treasure and Bloom was struggling came through Blessing. She mentioned casually, without my asking, that Gloria had contacted her twice asking whether she would consider supplying their new business. Blessing had declined politely on both occasions, citing her existing commitments and prior signed agreements. Funmi told me the identical story when I saw her. So did Tund without any prompting. Raymond had apparently contacted Amara directly through a mutual acquaintance, offering to pay above my current rate to secure her products for their business. Amara called me the same evening to let me know what had happened. She said simply, "I just thought you should know." I thanked her sincerely and genuinely. What Raymond had failed to understand, what neither of them had grasped at any point, was that the artisan community in our city was small, closely connected, and in constant communication with one another. Every approach Gloria and Raymond made was reported back to me within days, not because anyone was deliberately spying, but because these were people with genuine, long-standing relationships with me who found the entire situation deeply uncomfortable. A business built on borrowed strategy cannot purchase what only years of authentic, patient relationship building can earn. Marcus discovered Petal and Thread by accident. He saw an email notification on our shared laptop. I had forgotten to close the tab. He came to me that evening, his face showing confusion and genuine hurt. He asked quietly what Petal and Thread was. I told him everything without hesitation. Calmly and clearly. I explained the supplier agreements and the trademark. I told him about the customer waitlist. I described the Saturday handover meeting and explained precisely what I had and had not included in those color-coded folders. He was quiet for a long time. Then he asked whether I had done this because I did not trust him. I thought carefully about the honest answer before speaking. I told him I had done it because I did not fully trust his ability to keep things from his parents, and that was different from not trusting him as a person, but it was still a real problem we needed to address directly. He did not shout or leave. He sat at the table in silence for a long while. Then he said quietly that he had been allowing his mother to manage things she had no business managing. It was the most self-aware thing I had ever heard him say. I did not celebrate that moment because it was not a celebration. It was the beginning of a much harder and longer conversation that continued across many weeks, about boundaries, loyalty, and what marriage was truly supposed to mean from the inside of one. I will not pretend we fixed things quickly or easily, because this story has had enough dishonesty in it already. What I can tell you is that Marcus changed his phone password so his mother could no longer casually access it. He had a direct, uncomfortable conversation with Gloria, telling her clearly that his marriage came before any family business arrangement. Gloria did not receive this well at all. She called me 3 days afterward and said I was turning her son against his own family. I told her calmly I was sorry she felt that way. I did not apologize for anything further, because I had nothing more to apologize for. Raymond sent Marcus a long message about ingratitude and parental sacrifice. Marcus read it carefully, showed it to me without comment, and archived it without sending any reply. Standing in our kitchen watching him do that quietly, I found I could love him a great deal in that particular, ordinary moment. Treasure and Bloom officially closed 7 months after it launched. I did not hear about it from Gloria directly. I found out through a post in a local small business group online where someone asked for gift curation recommendations and another commenter noted that Treasure and Bloom appeared to no longer be operating. I checked their social media. The last post was 6 weeks old. Their website returned an error page. I sat with that information quietly for a while before reacting to anything. I want to be clear, I felt no joy. What I felt was something quieter and more complicated, the particular sadness that comes from watching something fail that never needed to fail. Something that collapsed because of impatience and the belief that you could take what another person had built with real work and wear it like a coat already fitted to your shape. Gloria and Raymond had the full strategy document. They had the pricing model, demographic research, and content calendar. What they lacked was the 3 years of quiet, unglamorous, relationship building that made any of it worth anything. You cannot copy the roots of a tree and wonder why the leaves you planted from nothing refused to grow. Petal and Thread was growing beautifully by every honest measure. I crossed 150 completed orders by the end of my 4th month. A women's lifestyle magazine reached out for a feature after their journalist discovered my work through one of my artisan partners. I had hired a part-time assistant named Chisholm, sharp, organized, and genuinely passionate about the work from her very first day with me. Two of my founding artisan partners had expanded their own operations because of the consistent order volume the brand was sending their way. Blessing had hired her younger sister to manage production. Funmi had moved from her kitchen into a proper small studio space and sent me photographs the morning she received the keys. The business I had protected was no longer mine in any narrow sense. It was connected to real livelihoods, genuine expansions, and real families building something lasting from their craft and skill. I thought about that connection regularly. I thought about what would have happened to all of them if I had allowed the business to be taken without a fight. The protection had never been purely about my pride or my clever planning. It had been about an entire small network of people who had trusted me early and deserved that trust held carefully. Gloria made one final attempt 5 months after Treasure and Bloom closed. She arrived on a Wednesday morning. She had returned her key, so she rang the bell. She asked to speak with me alone. Marcus was at work. I let her in and made tea. She sat at the same kitchen table where she had once turned through my business plan. She looked older than I remembered. Not dramatically so, but genuinely tired in a way that had not been there before. She said the business had not worked. The suppliers they found were unreliable. They had badly underestimated how difficult building something from nothing truly was. She paused. Then she said, very quietly, "I think we made a mistake, Emma." I poured my tea slowly. I looked at her across the table and let the silence sit. I told her I appreciated her saying so. I said building something real requires time that cannot be shortcut by anyone. I did not say the other things I had every right to say. She already knew each one. They sat in the room between us without needing names. When she left, she hugged me briefly at the door. It was the first genuinely honest thing that had passed between us in a very long time. I thought about forgiveness seriously during the months that followed. Not the easy version where everyone weeps and everything returns to how it once was. Real forgiveness, the kind that does not require pretending something painful never happened to you. I could hold both truths without contradiction. Gloria had tried to take something that was mine, and she was also my husband's mother who had acted from ambition and poor judgment rather than pure calculated cruelty. Raymond was harder for me personally. He had been more deliberate and clear-eyed about what they were doing. But he was also a man watching a venture he had staked real confidence in unravel completely. I was not responsible for his feelings about the consequences of his own choices. What I decided, and it was a conscious, considered decision, was not to carry the anger forward into everything I was building. Not because Gloria and Raymond deserved my peace, but because I had fully earned mine. I had won, not loudly or dramatically, but in the quiet, thorough way that actually lasts over time. My business was flourishing. My marriage was genuinely healing. My artisan partners were thriving. Dragging old resentment into all of that would have been like hauling damaged furniture into a clean, bright new home. The magazine feature ran 8 months after Petal Thread launched. It was a 2-page spread with photographs of the gift boxes, the artisans in their workspaces, and me at my work table on a Friday morning. The journalist asked what the real secret was to building a loyal artisan community. I gave her the honest answer: you find people with genuine talent, you believe in them before they are widely successful, you pay fairly, and you show up reliably when you say you will. Nothing revolutionary in those words. Simply the patient, unglamorous work that cannot be faked, copied, or taken by anyone carrying a color-coded folder and confident assumptions. The morning the magazine reached newsstands, Blessing sent me a voice note. She was crying lightly, the good kind. She said her grandmother had seen the article at a neighbor's house. She said her grandmother had cut out the page and had it framed. I sat in my car in a car park and listened to that voice note 3 full times before I could move. This was what the business had always been about. Not revenge or proving a point to anyone. A grandmother somewhere in the city, holding a framed page, feeling proud of her grandchild's name in print for the first time. Marcus and I took a trip for our 5th wedding anniversary. We had always talked about visiting the Volta region but had never gone. There was always a family obligation, a reason that turned out to have been shaped by what his mother preferred. We spent 4 days in the hills. We ate well, walked long distances, and talked more honestly than we had in years. He said he was sorry, not for any single incident but for the pattern of prioritizing his first family over the one we were building. I told him I accepted that genuinely. I told him I was sorry for shutting him out of my planning instead of bringing the problem to him earlier. We were each right and wrong in the layered way that real marriages always are. On the last evening, sitting on a terrace watching the sun drop behind the hills, he asked where I wanted Petal and Thread to be in 5 years. I told him honestly. I spoke for nearly 20 minutes about the flagship box collection, the artisan microgrant fund, the wholesale partnerships forming quietly. He listened to every single word without checking his phone once. It was, in the small ordinary way that matters most, exactly what I had always wanted from him. I am writing this 1 full year after Treasure and Bloom went dark. Petal and Thread has completed over 400 orders. I now have 14 artisan partners, and 3 have received individual press features because of the visibility the brand created for their work. Chisholm manages our entire fulfillment process independently. I work 4 days a week and protect my Fridays for product development, a luxury that still surprises me on quiet mornings. Gloria and I see each other at family occasions. We are not close, but we are genuinely civil. I believe we understand each other now in a way that did not exist before. Raymond shook my hand at a gathering last month and said my business was impressive. I thanked him simply and moved on. I needed nothing more from him than that. What I want you to carry from this story is not the planning or the legal agreements or the quiet strategy, though all of it mattered. It is this: what you have built with real work and genuine love is always yours. Protect it not by shouting, but by knowing its roots more deeply than anyone else ever could. That knowledge is the one thing no one can ever take from you.